Thank you, everybody, again for joining us. My name is Shelby Ruff. I'm the president of the board of directors for Eco El Paso. And we are here again for the last and final speaker for our 2-week virtual speaker series for our 13th annual conference, focused on sustainability during a pandemic. And we're out in the hot, arid climate of El Paso, Texas. And we've had a variety of speakers this week that are touching on a variety of different topics within sustainability. And so today we have one of our sponsors for the event and friends and partners that helps us in the community. We have Lauren Baldwin, and she is with Quantum Engineering Consultants Incorporated here in El Paso, Texas. And their website's under construction, soon to launch very, very soon. But I wanted to pass off the mic to Lauren and let you make your intro and take it over from here.
Thanks, Shelby. You can see my screen okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I was thinking yesterday I was on a call and they kept asking that. I was like, yes, we can all see it. Like we've heard this over and over in Zoom. So I wanted to not say it and you can't help yourself. Yeah. So my name's Lauren Baldwin, like he said, and I'm with Quantum Engineering Consultants. I'm not an engineer. I also, people mistook me for a civil engineer yesterday because of the company name, but I'll explain that in a minute. So I'm not an engineer. I'm on the non-engineer side. But thanks. I want to first close this out by thanking Shelby. You've done a wonderful job, and everyone on your board and all the speakers that have participated. I think this is a wonderful conference. This is very much needed. Education is the most important thing we can do. So I think it's awesome that you got the wonderful lineup of speakers you did. First, a little bit about me, because I think it's important also that the person you're listening to knows what they're talking about. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background. So this is a little outdated, but I have about 9 years of experience in sustainability program management. I worked for the city as the sustainability coordinator of the city of El Paso for 6 years, working on acquiring grant funding to implement sustainability projects, working on projects that help to divert waste from the landfill, saving money on our city's electric bills. And I've been part of EPA, environmental boards, and many local boards. And I love sustainability. So when I was at the city, I thought I could get a lot done. I really wanted to transition to the private side and see what we could get done on the private side. And so me and my business partner, Fred Lopez, who was also at the city as a transportation planner, we decided to leave the city, form a consulting company called Creosote Collaborative. Did great, expanded. We grew to 5 employees, 5 wonderful employees. And then we really wanted to continue broadening. So that's when we talked with Quantum Engineering, partners of ours, Bobby Gonzalez, doing wonderful work, including the UTEP Sustainability, UTEP Transformation Project, and decided to merge with them and broaden what we were doing. So now we do urban planning, sustainability, and engineering consulting. So a little about me. And when I'm not working, I'm hanging out with my little sweetie, Dash, who's about 3 now. And in my free time, I'm a CrossFit and Olympic lifting coach. So now we know each other. This was a fantastic lineup of speakers. You know, we heard from Jonathan, who's the electric car guru in the area, Ryan talking about geothermal heat pumps. We heard about solar, sustainable lifestyles, green buildings, people who are leading in the region in this, talking about climate change, climate action. Candace, who's killing it on the nonprofit side, really boots on the ground work. The energy behind us, you know, whenever we get tired, Candace is still going. And then folks like Hilda, who are really leading it from the social justice side, talking about contamination in our environment and how that impacts folks, doing a really fantastic job. And Fernando, who I admire, he came from the private side and then went to the public side. So we kind of swapped, doing a lot with urban heat island effect right now, and really going from the data-driven sides, which I want to talk a little bit about today. So in wrapping up this conference, I want to talk about how to make change. So how do we take everything we learned from all of our fantastic speakers, and then how do we actually make the change? What are the next steps we want to do? And I wanted to avoid any broad concepts, because I don't like when you end a conference and they're like, all right, now be effective, stay committed, don't give up. You know, like I want to give you actual data and numbers and things that I think are important that you can use going forward. And so I'm going to talk about things that I've learned from other people, things that I'm borrowing from other people, because there are a lot of people that are a lot smarter than I am, including all of these fantastic speakers, and giving you the the equipment you need to move forward and make solid change in our community. So I think what's really important right now, especially amidst COVID, which you've heard from the other speakers, is really presenting what we want to achieve in terms of health, safety, money, and then how you can help others achieve their goals. So, I joke, people don't care. No one cares about the environment. People don't care about CO2 emissions. People don't care about wildlife. And I say that jokingly, sarcastically, because of course we all care, but it's hard to make the case from this will help the burrowing owls, because to people who are budget restricted, they just can't even look at that right now, So if you can make the case from a health, safety, money perspective, it's hard to turn these things down. So it's hard to not highly prioritize these things, what I'm saying. So let's talk about a couple things. So first, from the health side, this was something I learned from a recent conference, and I've heard it before, but it was the first time I got all the data behind blue zones. And I think it's really impactful. So what are blue zones? 5 longevity hotspots in the world. These researchers looked at where were people living into their 90s, 100s, and still being productive in society, and they called them blue zones. They found these 5 longevity hotspots where people are still working, contributing to their community. And then they looked and analyzed what was common between all of them. There's a ton if you want to research it, but I want to show you a quick video about it. It's about a minute long. And this was what they did in Fort Worth. And they started to implement some blue zone technologies, some insights. So family first, they'll talk about the 9 principles of it. Recharging, knowing how to de-stress, or downshift, do they call it? Cool. So I like the video because it gives you a good overview, but nothing really sticks because there wasn't any data in there, right? So, and I think this goes to the point of also stick with data, 1 to 2 points per slide or per presentation, even, that you want people to remember. Hammer it home with data. If you don't have the data, get the data. So things that stuck with me, and so this is from the Texas Trails Conference. The average age of women in this photo is 101. They've been meeting together regularly for 90 years. And the first thing they do in the morning is go check on each other. This goes to when we talk about social resilience, social networks, social connectivity. These are all extremely important for longevity. And the way we design our community really ties into this, happiness levels. Let me go. Okay, so let me go to. So this goes to that connect piece, putting loved ones first, having 3 close ones in your life ties to longevity, having strong social networks. If you remove someone from loved ones, you shave 5 years off their life. The speaker at this conference actually said isolation kills.
Wow.
And I think that's critical, like if we spread and as we grow and move apart, it's really starts to impact longevity, happiness. And then, so what else do these blue zones have in common? People were moving naturally, moving every 20 to 30 minutes. In that one community in Italy, they worked in the fields. They're very active. So they moved every 20, 30 minutes. I think that's a helpful note. Instead of just like move more, move every 20 to 30 minutes. They have the right outlook. We talked about that. If you're able to articulate your purpose in life, you live 7 years longer. They also found people that participated in faith-based organizations or did something with their faith-based group 4 times a week, you could live 4 to 14 years longer.
Wow.
And then I know, and I love this one, eat wisely, 4 to 5 ounces of red wine a day. So I feel like that's a great excuse to have wine at the end of the day. And then eating with other people. Yeah. So eating with other people. So again, the social networks comes into play again, being connected with your neighbors, being close with your neighbors, being nearby people. And this came up a lot when we were working on the resilience strategy for the city of El Paso too, is that it's these strong social networks especially help not only with longevity and overall well-being and happiness, but also if there's a emergency, if there's a extreme weather event, I know to go check on to my neighbor next door, and that's critical. So
Yeah, plus if I'm planting trees and installing solar, right, we all start to plant trees and install solar. Oh, you're doing your yard more sustainable. Okay, well, maybe we should all do our yard sustainably. It's very circular within the community. I like that.
yeah, and that a great example is that is we have a Chamizal community garden, and right near the Chamizal National Memorial. And one day we were working on cleaning it up. We did a neighborhood cleanup event and de-weeding and stuff in the community garden. And the neighbor right next door had some weeds, and when she saw us working in the community garden, she came out and started cleaning up her weeds. It has a ripple
Nice.
effect. It's really cool.
Absolutely.
So Fort Worth actually started to implement some of these blue zone principles. And, this is all great. They saw residents started to exercise more. They ate more produce. Well-being increased. Their well-being score improved. So it's all good, right? Cool, happy. But what would resonate with leadership? They saw a 16% drop in paid medical claims.
Uh-oh. I think we might have had a little interruption with the internet. And back to recording.
Okay, so computer difficulties. So Fort Worth implemented a lot of these things. They saw improvements in well-being elements. Residents were exercising more, consuming more fruits and vegetables, all really important things, but not as clear or as impactful, I think, to leadership as if you start talking about costs. So they saw one company that was working with them saw reductions in paid medical claims and also paid pharmacy claims. So now we're talking about money. Money drives the world. And they saw employee turnover rates drop, which is extremely important for leadership too. So I think this is the kind of data that can help us to make the case we want, so try to get this type of data, try to quantify. That is so key as we try to get our point across.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And so we talked about health and safety. I didn't touch on a ton here, but I know you all know all about safety. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about like design of streets and how that impacts safety, but keeping it nice and short. So I'm going to skip right to money. And this was a really interesting presentation I heard that I wanted to share and kind of drive home the point of cost of services. And if we want to achieve the things we want to achieve with limited city dollars, because of course we always have to participate with city or even with homeowners, everyone kind of has limited dollars. And so how do we use those most effectively? So we kind of have to get to the core of the issues. And so this had a big impact on me. So this was a presentation I saw called Economics of Land Use. And I'm hoping to hold maybe another CEU conference later in the year or later on so we can talk more about these things and give you guys some continuing education credits. And so what they focused on was this growth mindset we have, kind of growing out, as I talked about before, and expanding. But a lot of times we see, like they gave an example in Dallas where the city had grown by about 13%, but population growth had only grown by 4%. And we've seen similar things in El Paso also. We've annexed a lot of communities outward and are not seeing a matching growth with it. So what we need to start talking about, of course, is the maintenance after growth. So when you talk to City of El Paso staff, they have a lot of, they don't have the dollars. They're underfunded for infrastructure repairs. So how can they even start to look at adding solar to buildings, improving the recycling rates. Give other examples, but like, how can we start to look at those things if we improve our street design? That's a really good one. Some amenities like sidewalks, buffer bike lanes, things like that cost a lot of money. So how can we even start to talk about them if we cannot repair potholes in our streets? And it's not the city's fault. It's just kind of how we are growing and not matching the money we're receiving with the cost it takes to maintain the city.
Yeah.
So
plus our debt's huge, which is a concern.
And so there's options. How do we close that resource gap so we can at least start to use our money effectively to achieve the things we want to achieve sustainability wise? So we can keep development patterns and service levels where they are and charge more, right? So we can continue growing out and still providing fire, police, sidewalks, bike lanes, recreation centers, splash pads, things like that, and still providing those services and charging more, higher taxes and fees to cover the true cost it takes to maintain those. So that's an option, right? Option one. Or we can keep the tax rate where it is, but cut services to align with the revenue that we're getting from property taxes. And that's something we did have to have a hard conversation about a little while back with the budget. Like, should we cut libraries? Should we cut art programs? Because we can't do all this. Or third option, do we start to shift the development pattern in our infrastructure design to enable an affordable balance of services and taxes? So there's groups that start to look at value per acre. And so this is an example in El Paso in the east side, a business that has a huge value, almost 6 million value, and then they generate a lot of taxes. But when you look at the value per acre, it's only 3,500. So big lots and not a ton of value per acre. And then we look at an apartment in Central, brings in less taxes, granted, in comparison.
Yeah, but the density.
So if you look at the value per acre, it's bringing in 10 grand per acre. So if we had a ton of apartments filling up that acre block, you'd have much higher value per acre the way you've designed than this type of design. And we can if we are able to better maximize value per acre, that means less street facing an acre building, right? Like a block, and less infrastructure that's around that, then that means we can get more out of it and less infrastructure to maintain in comparison to the revenue we're getting.
Wow, that's a really good visual.
It's really, and so the city has actually done some good analyses like this and have provided recommendations, but I think this is just a really important conversation to have if we ever want to get to where we want to get. So there's an infrastructure funding gap. We all know this, I think this is really interesting. We do a lot of street reconstruction projects, right? And they're extraordinarily costly just by the nature of, especially in El Paso, we always have to meet ADA requirements and our updated design standards, which we should for any street reconstruction project, but it makes it expensive. So even if for this example here, if 100% of the property tax revenue was dedicated to this project, so if all of the revenue was generated from this went to this project, it would still take about 3 times the life of the project to pay it off. And it's not the costly design, and we like to often cut out, like if we're doing a project, the first thing that'll get cut is landscaping. Let's cut out the landscaping. Let's cut out the extreme safety features, maybe colored crosswalks or something like that, because they're expensive, they're costly. But instead of costing out those things, we need to look at things like the value per acre and how we're designing our zoning codes and things like that, what we're allowing per block, so that we can try to get towards and attack this infrastructure funding gap. So when we allow more parking, of course, it means less tax revenue. When we talk about low lot coverage, so more parking, fewer things on the lot, again, low tax revenue. And there's recommendations to address these things. So just a conclusion of this presentation, this point, was that in El Paso, 82% of all properties in the city are single family homes. All other housing options represent 6% of properties. So, we love single family homes, everyone does, but maybe it's just an opportunity to start looking at different options so we can help to start to address this stuff. Single family homes generate nearly half as much net revenue as other housing options, and commercial industrial properties represent about 4% of all properties.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll always love economics. I
Yeah,
think that,
numbers don't lie.
right. I think if I do a PhD, it'll be in environmental economics, because I think it's just the most, you have to look at the money. And so that kind of goes to my point here that I want to close out with is understand the data and the context of your situation when you make recommendations. As an example, we're working on a complete streets policy draft right now with the American Heart Association. And we've been growing the policy, modifying the policy so that we're not making recommendations that don't make sense for the city. I want to make sure we make recommendations that they can manage right now, that we aren't making high cost recommendations because they just can't, given what we're working with right now. We need to make it feasible, or it just won't, it's not sustainable. And so, and acknowledge the limitations of your audience. Acknowledge that they're completely underfunded and understaffed right now, given the situation. They can only do what they can. And so acknowledge that, and then give them the data and help them, we're doing all the work. We want to help you reach your goals, and this is a way to do it. So
yeah, that's awesome.
My next steps would be for everyone listening is to share the videos that ECO has put on. They're fantastic. Use data. Numbers stick with you. I've years ago, I heard that traffic circles can help to reduce traffic collisions by about 80%. And that's always stuck with me, so hopefully something I've told you today has stuck, and hopefully, try to remember that. Try to remember the numbers stick, and then keep in touch. If you guys need anything, shoot me an email. Follow up. This is my older email, but I'll keep it for about a year or so. We're about to switch the new website, as Shelby mentioned. So I'll have a new quantum engineering consultants email later on. But for now, you can absolutely reach me at this email.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Well, so I have a question then. So then what do you tell what do you tell Costco who's like, you know what, I'm going to open another Costco on the other side of town? What do you tell them? Build a parking garage and take less space, less acreage, so you can still get the parking features you want. Because, I get it, right? They want, during the holidays, they want to fill up those parking lots, but then they're empty all year, right? Or only on the weekends are they full. And, or, only a tenth or a third, during the week are actually being used. What do you tell them about, how do you convince them? A Walmart, an Albertsons, how do you convince them? Is it I assume it's probably in the money, but just curious, as a person who doesn't do this for a living.
Yes, there's lots of ways. So the city can kind of support that by having incentive policies for parking reductions. And that's how LEAD encourages parking reductions. You get more points for if you're able to reduce parking, encourage people to use alternative transportation or active modes of transportation to get to your business. So locating in the right spot is a key, being within the community where people can access it besides driving and needing a parking spot.
Sure.
You can incentivize people to carpool with carpool spaces and things like that, covered parking for electric vehicles, things like that. There's ways to incentivize people to, but then there's also shared use parking. That's a big one that's coming on, like getting more traction right now, is like you mentioned, maybe fewer people, like our shopping malls get mobbed during the weekend, right? So there's opportunities maybe to partner with schools where they're empty on the weekends and able to share parking lots in that way. You can, like parking underground is always a good option. Parking on top, there's ways to make parking more dense and work with it.
Parking above a Costco would be kind of cool. Then you could have another 20 businesses in there where the parking lot was, and have like a dense, if it's going to be commercial, make it dense commercial. If it's going to be residential. So does that mean, do you sort of follow the idea of, building high rises in downtown and putting dense populations or more apartments, or maybe not high rises, but just more sort of like condo living versus buying a home, you buy a condo? Is that sort of an idea that El Paso should look into or do more of?
I mean, I think it would be a strategy to help us start to address this value per acre issue.
Urban
that
sprawl.
we have. Yeah, and I would never want to, the American dream is having a home. I would never, that's not something I'm, single family, there's nothing wrong with single family homes. I think it's important to have different types of housing types also, because all my friends that live downtown are single and working folks. And so and that's like
Yeah.
I would have loved to live downtown, but I have a dog and a son. And so that's
Yeah.
I think we don't have the mix that we could to attract different folks right now. So I think that's something
Yeah.
we can look at, is looking at what's the demand for residential in those different types and making that happen. Maybe it's shared yards, whatever, but there's ways. Yeah, so I think it's just having all different types of attractive options for people, so that even if you did want a single family home, or maybe it's like, what do you want in that? Maybe for me, it was just a yard. I really, really like having a yard,
Yeah.
so I can let my dogs out in the morning because I have to go to work, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, so it's like, so that's something we're working with the DMD on a market analysis, a retail analysis, a residential analysis, to try to get at that, to try to figure out, are we providing what people want so that they are encouraged to live in more dense areas?
Yeah. Or smarter neighborhoods with parks in
Yeah.
the middle. And like you said, more roundabout intersections, which I will probably remember that from this video for sure. 80% is too big of a number to ignore. Like you said, numbers are usually, that's where you start to find the sources of truth in numbers a lot of times, or at least it shows you a pattern. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with all that. Well, thank you. I know that we do have at least one individual that had joined us. If you do have any additional questions, you can ask them live now if you want to come off mute for any reason, or if you do have any additional questions, you can always email Lauren or Eco Paso, and we'll gladly get back to you.
Hi.
I have no questions. Thank you so much. I just popped in here spur of the moment. This is the first time I've seen or heard of this speaker series and all of this. So I'm sure as time goes by and I get more involved, I'll have more questions for you. But thank you very much for your time.
Of course, thanks for listening.
Great, thank you. Yeah, go check out ecoelpaso.org. Again, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based here in El Paso, Texas. We're also an all volunteer board. So this is my volunteer time. I do have a full-time job, just like I know Lauren does. And so she's volunteering as well. But this is our 13th annual conference. This year we did make it virtual as opposed to having continuing education credits for engineers and architects. We just felt it was a lot easier this year just to have a free series, just to spread education across El Paso. And a lot of these concepts can be used really around the country. Just adapt it to your local climate and weather patterns. Thank you again, everyone. Check out ecoelpaso.org. Thank you, Lauren. You're awesome. We appreciate you being a sponsor, volunteering, helping us win grants, helping us execute projects, just almost always helping. So we could not thank you and Sarah and your team, and thank you so much.
Of course, thanks, Shelby.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.